Is it working? We've had some problems and it disconnected. Is it working now? Is it the same link? I'm gonna look on my phone. I'm just gonna sort out some technical difficulties. I'm gonna check whether it's still the same link. No, it's not. So we'll share the new link very quickly and we'll begin in a few minutes. Hello guys, can you hear me? Is anybody online? I'm gonna type something in the chat and we should be right now also having the right thumbnail and the connectivity is now back to excellent. I'm now connected via Ethernet cable to avoid any issues in the future, and I'm gonna delete the previous video that's now on the channel, and at least this video won't have to have as many cuts as the last one did. Yeah. So I'm just gonna say hi, feel free to chat with me. Apparently we now have more playbacks but no concurrent viewers. Well, we have one. Zuboito, yeah, great, you can hear me. I've had yesterday also like the video also parallelly running on my iPhone, and this was kind of a mess. Like that's why I was constantly distracted. I was making sure that the connection worked, that the Wi-Fi that my iPhone was using for it wasn't too much for the actual stream. So yeah, it's been kind of a mess, but at least we got it all working. So now you should be seeing an absolute technological mess. So I'm gonna put OBS in the background, and the stream, you don't need to see it either right now. I'll be able to use that on my iPad as well. And as you have probably seen, today's topic is very, very broad, and it's kind of, for me, it has been the logical continuation of yesterday's stream, which was all about just me introducing myself and just talking some general stuff about what's been going on the last week. And this is kind of me going absurdly broad in order to make sure that I want to set a baseline for everybody who comes into this channel. My goal essentially right now is to make a super long stream. Like I assume it's probably going to be around one and a half hours, maybe even 2. It depends slightly on my mood. I'm a little tired, but I'm kind of pumped to do this. And the idea behind this stream is very easy. What I want to nail is a baseline of my feelings on almost every Apple product right now. That's why we simply have Apple's homepage online. I'm not going to talk about services right now, no matter how much people pretend that it's such an enormous part of Apple. It is. It's not as big as some make it out to be, but I would go insane trying to cover all those topics right now. Apparently we now have 3 concurrent viewers. Just write in the chat, guys. You don't have to participate for long. Just let me know who's online and who's doing what. I have shared it with some friends and some family members, so it's probably gonna stay 3 because I know that most everybody is right now occupied. So at least I think we might always have Zuboito here. Type in the chat, man, whether you like the stream, whether you have some kind of improvement suggestions, whether you can hear me clearly, whether the screen is fully online. I believe a little bit of it is cut off, but it's not egregious. Like I can see a little bit more of the Apple Watch homepage link on my screen, but I've now set it up that it at least captures the entire screen. Like yesterday it was only capturing like 2/3 because it was capturing 1080 image on a 1440p display, and now I've set it up so that it's still 1080p, and the final video on YouTube will actually be 720p. But if I was using my iMac in 720p, I don't think that you would like the stream very much. Like everything would just be gigantic, and I would have to scroll and give you all epilepsy during that. So I hope everybody is having at least some fun. The chat seems to be working. We do have some concurrent viewers. Feel free to leave a like if you like it down the road. Obviously, I'm not forcing anybody to leave some likes. Yeah, let me start with some simple stuff. Now, I've been basically online for 5 minutes. It's kind of like been the introductory banter. And mostly complaining about tech stuff when it comes to setting up OBS. But yeah, yesterday's stream went really well. I think for the first time doing so, I now have a little over 60 views. I would say around 10 of them are me, based on like me checking out the video on all devices, how it looks, how it works. And whenever I was trying to edit it, I would have to go through the website. So probably around 50 actual views, and some of them from my family, some probably have clicked twice on purpose. So I'm actually very happy with that result. I think for a first time it's quite solid. And I really hope that we can continue that streak a little bit with this stream. I think this will do worse because I've been kind of setting up my first stream for a while. So if it does a little worse or around the same, I actually would be very happy. Because I also think that YouTube doesn't quite reward like super long streams when you are very new. Like they reward it if you have like 1,000 viewers at a time, but if you have 3, I don't think that YouTube is gonna go out of its way to share my videos right now. And I'm not complaining. It's kind of like being a beginning developer in the App Store. Nobody expects to be right there on the Today page and be advertised by the platform, even though YouTube is obviously structured very differently. Yeah, so I'm kind of excited because it's going to be a long one. And at first I wanted to just give some summary of why I'm doing streams and not finalized videos, like pre-render stuff essentially. And the main point being is I think it's going to be easier on all of us. Even though I could be recording this and just posting it, it will rob us of any interaction. And I want to have as much constructive criticism collected as possible. So you are absolutely free to type in anything you want that will help me down the road, whether you like it, whether you don't like it. Zuboito is back in the chat. Don't worry, Zuboito, you're alone right there. So you're essentially going to be chatting with me down there. But I don't think that it's such a bad issue. If we had too many people, I might get confused because I'm not quite used to that. Yeah, so I'm doing streams because I think it's going to make the interaction between us easier. And I also think that it's going to be easier on me because I right now don't have the measures or the time to make high quality production videos. For one, I don't want to go on camera myself, but the other issue is just that I don't have the time. Like I have the time to stream now and then, especially like for longer periods of time, and I could certainly do a video in that period. But whenever I just want to invest 2 hours, I would like to have a finalized project. I'm just a little bit too much, yeah, so it's a one-on-one interview, but we do have somebody else watching. Maybe it's just me, but it shouldn't count me as watching now. And I don't know if any of my friends is can be better. I couldn't have said it better myself, man. I hope once I have a bigger audience, it's still gonna be us chatting together, and I'm not gonna ignore you. At least I'm not gonna try. But later down the road, you can always send me a super chat, and then I will certainly respond. I'm getting too big for my britches already, am I? So, and I think for now I'm gonna keep to the streams. And I will look at expanding my portfolio down the road. And I think to still satisfy YouTube, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the big streams that I'm gonna do from time to time. I think like once a week is kind of realistic to make a stream like we're gonna do today. I know, for example, that until Sunday or Saturday at least, I won't have the time for a stream like this week. And then for another 2 weeks, it's going to be similar. And after that, it's basically going to be like Death Valley. Like, you won't be seeing much from me, man. Yeah. So I just wanted to get as much out as possible. And then I'm going to take the bigger streams and I'm going to cut them up into parts. Essentially, like, this is one topic I'm talking about, this is another topic I'm talking about, and then it's going to be concise 15-minute chunks where you can just go on my YouTube page and just watch it individually. What's also going to be interesting, I think, that I'm going to just post them like once a day or like twice a day, and it's going to be like 4 or 5, so I will have like essentially content for the rest of the week. Yeah, I don't know who's the second or third viewer, and it's kind of going up and down in that way. So, but we've had like 2 concurrent viewers yesterday, so it didn't stop us back then, and we still have probably some guys maybe coming in once their work is over. I've started 2 hours earlier than I did yesterday because so many said that they have work. I assume that on Monday they kind of also want to relax from work and might take a little longer to get there. But I hope we'll get at least another viewer during this. And who knows, why doesn't one of my family members at least like let it run in the background for YouTube algorithm? I really should give them better information on how to make money here. Because it's going to take quite a while with just live streams to also get to monetization. And ultimately, that's my goal. I love talking to you, and I don't need the money to do so, and I still will be doing it even if I don't get monetized. But I like setting goals for myself, and I think monetization is kind of a good goal in that way because it's also quite realistic, like 1,000 subscribers, 4,000 view hours, which is weird because apparently I have like 4 or 5 view hours on my last video, but I also don't have any view hours on the monetization page on YouTube, even though it promises to count the view hours of live streams after they are on the channel. Essentially what I'm doing here is I'm setting a baseline for myself, like those are my streams, this is what they look like, and those are the topics I cover, and ultimately it's where I want to go. And as for covering Apple, I'm still gonna cover other stuff from time to time. Like I'm also interested in consoles. I'm also interested in Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA stuff. From time to time, I might cover some big releases in terms of Android or Windows, especially those that are heavily competing with Apple products. And during all that, I will try to talk as much as possible about my personal, YouTube algorithm be a real B word. Yeah, I'm essentially applying everything that I have learned over the years, but from like other YouTubers. But it's obviously just my second time. I've just learned to set up OBS right, so it might take a while for me to nail the YouTube algorithm. Yeah, I'm not going to rely on the YouTube algorithm. I'm going to share my videos as much as possible. I'm going to ask all my viewers to share them as much as possible. And essentially, I'm just going to try to make the best content I can make. And down the road, I hope something will come out of it. I don't want for this to become my main job, especially not in the near future. But I would like to be it's something that I can rely on in my life for something I do for myself and maybe for a small audience that enjoys my content. Yeah, I will chit chat in the chat, but I'm just gonna respond with a voice. It's gonna have a small delay. You can let me know like how big the delay is. Like I got your message about it right now. Yeah, Twitch is interesting because I don't think that Twitch is very much in love with the content I'm making. Like Twitch feels very entertainment based. Like obviously I hope that what I do is entertaining, but it's not necessarily like live streaming in terms of video, gaming or just like some reactions. And obviously this isn't TikTok content, it's 2 hours long. So I will think about Twitch. I know a lot of YouTubers are doing like Twitch on the side, and down the road I might try to do so. Like OBS obviously works well or so. It's around a minute of delay. That's interesting. It should be around 15 seconds, but I guess the processing from where I am just takes a while. It still shouldn't stop us from like chatting nicely in the chat. It might be also that I just reacted to something a little late, but I think 30 seconds to 1 minute is still all right. Everything that would be like 2 minutes would essentially be worthless, especially if there are many people in the chat. Yeah, I will definitely look into Twitch. The point is that I also don't have much experience with Twitch. I watch some gaming content on that from time to time, but I think I will definitely try one, and I will share it and let all of you know. I also just where I am, like Germany is more of a YouTube market than Twitch. I think this is why also like gaming has also been growing as a streaming content on YouTube, because I think that many markets just aren't as much in love with something like Twitch, and they just prefer to get all of their content through one platform, which in this case would be YouTube. Yeah, Doctor. Yeah, I'm. I definitely am not Doctor Disrespect or basically any other gaming streamer. It's. I just don't think that my from it. I think anybody who has kind of contacted me and talked to me for a long time knows that I'm just not very reactionary in my style, but I'm just not as entertaining in terms of like the gaming dudes, and this just made me sound so old, but it just isn't my style. Like I'm definitely not PewDiePie. I think this is kind of like the baseline of what you should be as a gaming streamer, or you should be like super cool and trendy, and while I'm definitely not uncool, I'm not cool in that way. Yeah, I think that the audience is different in Twitch, and I'm definitely gonna try it out just to make sure how it is. Like Telosive Tech is regularly twitching, if you can use it as a verb, even though it kind of sounds like epilepsy. But yeah, covering all audiences is really important in that way, and at least to know that there is an audience that I can reach. And if like YouTube gave me a decent response to my first stream, I didn't expect obviously for it to like break 100 even in a day, but it's getting there. And if Twitch does something similar, and especially like it's more difficult for me to stream to both simultaneously. Like I don't have the power to do so on my device, so I might be interested. I will probably look at Twitch, and then I'm gonna create content that I think is more geared towards the Twitch audience. I think this is gonna be a little like more reactionary. Like I might do something more entertaining on Twitch, where I will talk less. Maybe it's gonna be like a reaction to some Apple memes or something, like less analytical and more like funny haha, and not funny like I'm a clown. Okay, so I think that's gonna set the baseline. It's basically been like 20 minutes right now. We still have 2 people watching, so it's probably counting me, even though it's not supposed to. And we will see down the road how it will how it will work out. I've shared the link on all platforms that I'm on. This is also like another point, like I'm interested in like I hate Facebook, so I'm not gonna share there even if it promised me to like give me immediately 1,000 subscribers. It's just not the platform that I want to engage on. But I will engage basically everywhere else once I figure out how to do it well. Like I think it's working quite well on something like Twitter, and I think on YouTube it's basically as good as I can be right now, but it's gonna get better, and I think I will reach more people with that. So let's start. Zuboito, I think you're on the Twitch. I was just thinking of going, not necessarily fully chronologically, but I was thinking about starting with the Mac. How do you feel about that? It's kind of the most left. Yes, Zuboito, you're definitely worth 2 people, I think more. Right now, as my only audience member, you're worth 1,000. Can you also explain it to the YouTube algorithm that I have right now 1,000 concurrent viewers because you're so great? So I was thinking of starting with the Mac. It kind of makes sense. It's Apple's oldest, most traditional hardware product. It's very deeply rooted in the Steve Jobs era. It's kind of the only product right now where most of its historical releases came under Steve, or the time when Steve was kicked out of a company. But it's not like the iPhone where he was there until the iPhone 4, with the iPad where he was until the iPad 2, or like AirPods where he wasn't there for any of them, or even with the Apple TV, which was... You want me to cover MagSafe? I was gonna cover today more hardware products, like big ones, but I'm gonna talk about individual features once I get to those products, including some rumors. So I think I'm gonna start with Mac. I can see you also suggesting Mac as a second option, and I'm definitely gonna cover the MagSafe rumor for the Mac coming with like the redesigned 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, and I'm gonna talk about MagSafe on the current 12 series iPhones once I get to the iPhone. So I might, after the Mac, just go chronologically from Mac to iPad to iPhone to Apple Watch and then to Apple TV, where I kind of go like the easy route. Yeah, I think a Mac is especially interesting right now due to M1 chip, and it's kind of like the point of why we are seeing like the M1 being the future of the Mac. Apple is kind of not shy about advertising that, and we're obviously having huge rumors here. So let's start with the Mac. And this is gonna be the moment where I'm gonna cut the video and gonna start talking about the Mac. So I just have to set it up in my mind. So the Mac. The Mac is obviously Apple's oldest product category. It dates back to the beginnings of Apple, to Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in their garage, and the kind of like self-made processors back then, when transistors were actually something that you could like decent processing tech, when you can still get it like commercially, to build it yourself, where you didn't need as much high-end parts to even to like make a processor, which is hilarious to think that, like, imagine making a 5nm processor right now yourself. It's crazy. But I will focus today, like, I think a historical outlook is going to take me a very long time, and I think I might make individual episodes on each Apple category. Yeah, Zuboito, you are very free to make PC guy arguments in the chat. Meanwhile, I will focus on the Mac, because that's kind of always been the cooler role, like even in the new Mac versus PC ads, even though the Mac is just tangentially inside them because of Intel. Yeah, I still think that the Mac guy is kind of looming over all of that, like the young version of Justin Long. I think that version is still like sitting there and thinking like, man, I got kind of lame to be doing that, and always failing to doing that as well. Like the Huawei ads that I've covered yesterday, and then it's like now it's Intel, but I'm also not knowing anything about stuff myself, about tech myself a lot, which many people have said that he's not very like tech literate, or at least not a tech nerd. So it's kind of funny for Intel to advertise this as like a real perspective from Justin, which is kind of false advertising. It's not even really funny in that way. Like Apple didn't advertise the Mac versus PC ads as a hyper realistic approach of two regular people that is their opinion. But suddenly Intel is coming out, yeah, Justin grew up and that's what he is now into, and he's touching laptops that aren't even on, have widely Photoshop bezels, and the Macs look like they're like 10 years in the future in terms of bezels. But he didn't even try the Mac except to say that it supports only one monitor, which is also funny because it's like the base level MacBook Air. Like, who cares at that point? Like, I just need a laptop at some point to connect at university to a projector or TV, and that's basically it. Or even down the road, even if I was gonna do some gaming on the Mac, which obviously is a little bit of a problem overall. I'm gonna also cover that in the future. Yeah, I still would only need one monitor. So I don't know what kind of problems Intel is choosing to cover, especially since there are quite easy workarounds for that. But yeah, let's not dwell too much onto that, and let's cover the actual beautiful product, even though it's not new in terms of design. The MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro, and yeah, it's also mentioning here the Mac Mini. Those are the new three M1 products. M1 being, for those who don't know, I think most everybody will know by now. Even like a lot of laymen have come to me and talked about like Apple Silicon processors, which is quite cool to get that. Suboito, I'm now seeing the delay. I've just turned on the video on my iPhone, and it's probably around 30 seconds. Okay, so yeah, and Apple Silicon has been making a lot of buzz in the industry. Like, it's kind of demolishing the current offerings from Intel. Like, even where Intel sort of comes close in performance, it does so having twice the power draw, which results in a device that gets either much hotter or much louder through its fans, or even worse, like just its battery is completely useless. I think this is kind of funny how Intel was comparing the battery life of the 13-inch MacBook Pro, of the 13-inch MacBook Air, versus like the Windows laptop, that in performance they were actually comparing to the MacBook Pro originally, I believe. Yeah, so they were trying to be honest with like the MacBook Pro comparison, to say like those are similar like one fan devices, but then suddenly when it comes to battery comparison, they chose the MacBook Air, and the MacBook Pro has like 20% longer battery capacity, which is huge for laptops, because you always have a baseline power draw, and once you go like 20% above, it can sometimes result in like 25 or 30% higher power draw, because all the base level performance is already covered. Especially once you're in standby with like a properly set up processor, which the M1 is absolutely. So let us learn something about the M1, because to quickly cover it, neither the MacBook Air, neither the MacBook Pro or the Mac Mini got redesigns, except for the Mac Mini going silver again, the MacBook Pro doing absolutely nothing, and the MacBook Air losing its fans, which all are parts of the M1 design decisions that come with a hyper efficient processor. Yeah, I can get, Suboito, you hating the Intel versus Mac ads, because they're so like they're comparing like hyper different products. Like not only like they're comparing more expensive Windows machines to MacBooks, which like if you were asked 10 years ago, like, what is the comparison, like, it's usually, oh yeah, the cheaper Windows device is about as good as the MacBook Air, but it's like half as expensive, then that's an argument. But if your argument is we are close in terms of performance on a 50% more expensive product that is twice as loud and doesn't have any battery life essentially when you're using something like Final Cut or Adobe Premiere, where the MacBook will still give you like 4 or 5 hours of video editing, like, this is so insane to be seeing that with Apple. And it's kind of like a little bit in the MacBook, in the iPhone SE category, where the iPhone SE is not a technologically very advanced product, but the A13 is still better than basically anything else in the Android world. Like, they're very close in terms of multi-core CPU performance, even better because the iPhone SE is so thermally constrained. But it's $400, and most of those products that are $400 are the like Chinese, Indian brands that you can't even get here that much. Like, the price is most often like calculated from the Chinese yuan and the Indian currency. Like, it's just very difficult to like say like, yeah, I can have like this cheap phone here in the West without any problems. The OS is not a problem at all. The Chinese bloatware that is on it is not a problem at all. There goes my Chinese audience. No, Zuboido, I think it's just us in the chat because it's now showing one concurrent viewer, but I'm also online unless you just went off, but you didn't type anything in, so I doubt it. Knowing you, and I don't have a delay obviously in the live chat, so just leave a comment, man, to let me know. I think I'm right. It doesn't count me, but it is counting other people, and I think it's doing so right. Yeah, Zuboido is still on, so we now went from 2 to just 1 concurrent viewers. So I think we are now at peak, just one-to-one interview between me and Zuboido, which is absolutely fine. It's my second stream. It's already going quite for some time. We still haven't even finished the Mac. I think I'm discarding the idea of cutting the stuff into pieces for a stream where I will engage less with the audience. Right now, I just want to engage with the audience a lot. So I think it would look a little weird if I cut up those parts. But essentially, I'm also saying all this stuff, even though it's absolutely pointless for now and future viewers. I'm also saying that as a learning experiment for myself. So Zuboido, you are free to leave a comment whether you think it's a good idea to just let this video be as it is right now. And then afterwards, we are gonna go with streams where I will start with a topic, then essentially just talk for 10 minutes, and only afterwards I'm gonna acknowledge the chat itself. Let's go back to the Mac, which has always been Apple's core principle whenever they were giving it features from the iPad and the iPhone. The M1 is a giant leap in performance, especially over when you compare it to the most important comparison. I think is the previous dual-core MacBook Air that was on Intel's 10th gen, and it's essentially 3 to 4 times faster in most tasks, around double the performance in like properly optimized GPU tasks. And most importantly, it's so much cheaper for Apple to produce. It's like 16 billion transistors on a new node with completely integrated RAM, which makes logistics a little bit more difficult because Apple has to decide like with what memory does a processor come right off the gate. Like they cannot just slide in RAM into some slots like you can do on Windows machines, but even not on all Windows machines. And Apple has obviously been criticized for some wild marketing claims or even like unlabeled graphs, which is where we like this is good. Like this is essentially Apple advertising performance per watt, which I think they have chosen 14 nanometer as a baseline, which kind of makes sense because how close the M1 is to like the 8 core 10th and 10th gen parts that are still 14 nanometer based and like the 16-inch MacBook Pro. And I think it's still easily twice as efficient as the newer parts from Intel. Yeah, and some people were complaining about the graphs that they were doing. A lot of those graphs were completely unlabeled. I wonder if they still have the most infamous one of them here. No, they don't. And honestly, I also just don't want to play that game that some are doing. Like MKBHD has been complaining about those graphs. Even like Rene Ritchie has been complaining about those graphs. Honestly, I never saw those graphs as quite as misleading as some people wanted to make them look like. I think they were always like context bound in what was actually said during when they were showing those graphs. So I think it's kind of bad to take a graph from a keynote without the corresponding text. Like, sure, whenever they were like, it's better than the latest PC laptop chip, and where people were like, well, what is the PC laptop chip? And they later gave some context, but I think ultimately so much of this has been proven out. Like Windows Central has complained about Apple's promises here. They were ultimately proven wrong, even if they don't want to admit it. Like, I've had some huge even quarrels with like I believe it's the most important editor on them. I don't know if he's the chief editor. Like, I know that he is probably pretty big in the chain. Like, he was the author of the article that complained about Apple's graphs. Yeah, Apple puts asterisks on most charts and on most keynotes about like, this is the context, or this is subject to change, which is always the case for any presentation. And it's kind of funny that Apple has been the most honest from any big company when it comes to benchmarks and efficiency claims, even though they weren't even labeling those, because like NVIDIA promised us twice the efficiency going from Turing RTX 20 series to the RTX 30 series, which is Ampere. But we never got that. We got like 25% efficiency. We got almost no efficiency improvements on the higher end. Like, where essentially as much more performance as you need, you have to get almost all of that out of through higher power consumption. AMD has just started lying a little bit about their own performance, where like they have shown graph with the 6700 XT quite well competing with the 3070, which it really doesn't in most tests, unless it's like a hyper AMD optimized application. Yeah, exactly. You can see with Apple what they're comparing. Like on some there isn't, which is a complaint. Like, there are some graphs where you can see it, but I think fundamentally what matters to us is like Apple is setting up some goals for us. Like, at just 10 watts, which is the thermal envelope of a MacBook Air, like, we have been complaining about Apple not giving us information about chips. Like, even prior to that, like, the MacBook Air could have had wide swings between like 10 watts and 28 watts. Like, the MacBook Air is a 10 watt chip. It will probably reach around 15 at its maximum, and then it will throttle down a little, and at 1/3 less power consumption, it will do around 15% less performance, which especially in like long-term tasks, something like Blender or Cinebench, like, you might see it, but you definitely won't be seeing it on a single website whenever you're browsing or something like that. Yeah, that's also funny, like, and I will cover that in subsequent topics, and I'm gonna at least talk about it here, because it's kind of important competition, like other graphics cards and stuff. Like, Apple is using the most advanced node on the planet, TSMC's 5 nanometer. Like, NVIDIA is using Samsung's pretty crappy 8 nanometer because it has decent yields by now. It started a little bad, and even more importantly, like, the processors you can get on that node isn't very good, and Samsung knows that. Like, this isn't a criticism towards Samsung. Samsung's 5 nanometer node is very competitive with TSMC 7nm node. That's why all Snapdragon chips right now still have trouble competing with the A13, much less the A14. But right now you cannot still get all those devices even on older nodes. Like AMD is on 7nm, Nvidia on 8, Intel is using their own 10 and 14 nanometers, and granted Intel is a little better at supplies than AMD and Nvidia ever were. But like you still can get a decent graphics card. You are right now just getting the opportunity to get some Ryzen 3, like Zen 3, Ryzen 5000, god that's a confusing naming scheme, processors on the market. Meanwhile, the MacBook Air is regularly discounted like yeah, the MacBook Air is $1,000, the MacBook Pro is $1,299, and you regularly can get both of them for $100 cheaper, which in a market where everything else is price inflated or not available at all is kind of a big deal, and it kind of speaks a lot to Apple's ability. I'm just reading the chat right now. Like, yes, you have to consider a lot of stuff for like the technological aspect of M1. And it can use widely less than 10 watts, especially if you are just using one core, which many things are still one core, which is what is interesting about the M1 is that it has only one thread per core, which is different from the Intel and AMD architectures. So if you have a 2-thread task that would traditionally just use one core on other devices, here it's much better. It can use 2 cores and get much more performance out of that, because obviously just getting 2 threads on one core is never quite as fast as actually using 2 fully powerful modern cores. So, and the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro, I think, is the best example of like 10 watts. It's like, it's super easy. It just needs to run at like essentially an audible movement of the fan. And whenever it goes up to like maybe 20 watts, I think it's a pretty good estimation of like the highest peak you will reach on a MacBook Pro on a regular level. I think with like power virus stuff you can get something like 30 watts out of the M1, but I don't think that anybody will reach that with a normal task, because no task ever utilizes all cores, every single bit of memory, every single bit of like the interconnect that connects all those parts. Plus the GPU is probably like even crazier here, even though nobody is talking about it. Like the GPU has full access to like the memory, which is either 8 or 16 gigabytes, and it's super fast. But even more importantly, the GPU is crazy fast, and it still uses just like 5 or 6 watts at peak power draw, while still beating Intel's best integrated GPUs. So I really think that no matter how you feel about Apple, this chip rocks. And I think this chip completely redefines our look at the industry, where Apple isn't just the more expensive sort of premium version where some people may laugh to say like, oh, you're paying double for a machine that is made of a higher grade aluminum body and doesn't even have an integrated like a dedicated GPU. Like all of this is gone, because most people will probably never need much more performance than what is in the M1, which is something you couldn't have said prior. And if you had devices that offered a lot of performance, then you also had big battery problems, or their device got super hot. So all of this has been cleared up, and now we are looking towards the future. And I'm just going to briefly cover the redesign of the MacBook Pro, because this is probably what I want to talk about most right now. This is all German. I'm gonna do Mac rumors. Yeah, it's comparing to the GPU in the 16-inch MacBook Pro, like the base level, you get about the same performance as the 5300M, which is essentially the same performance as the 5500M, just with a little bit different memory setups. and it's like it uses like 4 times less energy at peak power draw. It's absolutely crazy. And that GPU is actually a 7 nanometer part, which is even crazier because it's just one node ahead. Like anybody who's telling me that it's just the processing node that Apple is using, that's complete BS. There isn't that much to show about the redesigned MacBooks, but they will use the M1X, or whatever Apple ends up calling, essentially a twice as wide M1 with like double the power cores, double the GPU cores, higher memory options, probably like the M1 already supports PCIe 4.0, but it doesn't have a PCIe 4.0 SSD. I think it's going to be quite a good advertising point, especially if Apple wants to keep the current prices, to say like, yeah, it's still 512 gigabytes as a base option, and on some others 256, but it's twice as fast, and the upgrade costs are still the same, which I think is ridiculous. I think $200 from 512 to 1 terabyte is okay, barely, but okay. And I think $200 for an upgrade from 256 to 512 is downright robbery. So I would never buy a device with 256 gigabytes as the base option because I need more. And I just wouldn't pay $400 to get 1 terabyte, especially not if it's just PCIe 3.0. Yeah, the leaker situation is actually interesting here. Like, we have covered yesterday a little bit about like Jon Prosser getting stuff wrong. I think we're gonna see more of that, and I think we're also gonna see a lot of useless stuff, because apparently leakers aren't great at predicting anything but iPhones, or completely logical updates, like knowing that the new iPad is getting like the A14X. And at everything else, they're like, oh yeah, if it's a redesign, then they know about it. For about the actual components or like major software features, like essentially all the stuff that sits on the inside, it's a lot more difficult unless it's literally like just saying, oh, Apple is going from a 5 nanometer node right now to a 3 nanometer node in 2 or 3 years. Like, yeah, no S Sherlock. Like, I'm trying not to swear because I hope YouTube won't punish me in any way. But I also don't have a big need to swear right now. I like the new MacBooks and I like the redesigns coming up. So I don't have a reason to swear right now. The most interesting part about this is because the 14 and 16 inch redesigns, which are going to be redesigns of the 13 and 16 inch that we have right now, exactly, we have covered the MacBook Air, the 13-inch MacBook Pro, that there isn't that much difference in the hardware in comparison to the previous gen, and just like with the Mac Mini, but it is much better because of the M1. The 16-inch MacBook Pro isn't even running a 10 nanometer Intel part. Like, it's still running a 14 nanometer part, I believe, a 9th gen CPU. Like, it doesn't say it here, but it doesn't even matter because there isn't a big difference between 9th or 10th gen here, or 8th before that. So yeah, and it's very expensive to go between individual options. And I think if Apple right off the gates like just gives the M1X like 8 cores, like it will have double the high performance cores over the current 13-inch MacBook Pro, like the $1,800 version with Intel, or like even the 6-core version of the $2,400 MacBook Pro. Like, that's absolutely crazy. And in terms of GPU, like, we also see here some stuff about, like, exactly, that's the Radeon Pro 5300M that it starts out. Like, essentially, like, a fully optimized, like, low latency Apple memory. Like, obviously it's off-the-shelf components, but like the stuff they're using in the M1, I think it's going to compete very well with GDDR6, like the low-level, low-clocked version. but I would love, absolutely love, for Apple to switch to not GDDR, but DDR5, which greatly competes actually with stuff like GDDR5, which is still slower, but because of Apple's highly integrated solution, where there would be so much less travel between the CPU and the GPU, like it would be essentially as good as GDDR6 for the kind of integrated GPUs that Apple is working on. Yeah, there were rumors about the 15-inch MacBook Air. I think it's kind of always been a dream for some people to have like a $1,400 15-inch MacBook Air that still has like the same specs, and that a $2,400 version MacBook Air would be like with 2 TB of storage and like 16 or 32 gigs of memory. Like it would be much better than the 16-inch MacBook Pro. At that price point, except for a GPU. But it's also kind of pointless right now, because I think that as Apple just covers the middle ground with the 14-inch and the bezel-less design, given how expensive designing a new device, even though it's like just part of an established category, but it is gonna be a different SKU of that device, and just give it 1 inch more than the 14-inch version and 1 inch less than the 16-inch version, I don't think makes a lot of sense. I think down the road, it's actually more likely that Apple would reintroduce something like the MacBook Air, like a 12-inch device with as little bezels as possible, even though they would have to compromise on the keyboard because the 12-inch MacBook had huge bezels. But I think it's more likely. I don't think Apple likes making big versions of cheap devices, because I also think that it's going to be kind of like an iPhone 12 mini situation, where a lot of people are asking for it, but very few people are actually going to buy it over the better alternative, which is a more portable and just as powerful and still cheaper MacBook Air. And yeah, Apple certainly isn't going to price it very closely to their 13-inch version. It just doesn't make sense to them. Like, it would have a bigger battery, it would have better performance, even if it's just a marginally better chip. Like Apple just doesn't like shipping much bigger than they have to, especially if the previous version is still doing so well. Yeah, so I'm not finished here with the Mac overall, but I think we should be moving on closely. Obviously, the iMac, I will just quickly say, like, the current setup is quite okay if you can get a very, very good deal out of it, but I don't think it's worth it, because the M1, M1X solutions are gonna be so much better. And the the Mac Pro is an absolute steal, but it's Apple stealing money from you, especially if you get the baseline version. Yeah, I think that's kind of realistic with your writing, Zuboito. Like a 13-inch smaller MacBook Air that is about as big as the MacBook from 2015, I think would be very realistic for an Apple product. Like, just look at this monstrosity. It costs $6,000 for base specs that are like sub $800, except, like, yes, I know that the Xeon W chips are very expensive, but basically every AMD chip right now, even the 5600X, which costs $300, is better than this. And like, the other versions are absurdly overpriced. The base 32 gig configuration is decent, but it's also not very fast memory, so it's pretty cheap memory, even if Apple uses like ECC memory for this, but still it's not enough. And the graphics are absolutely insane, but they're also quite outdated. And I'm also talking about like the Vega 2 here. Like, the 5700X is decent. The 5500X is a waste of money because of the baseline version, because they're pretty similar in actual performance. It's just that this is a completely outdated architecture. So you can see it, like, they have both 5.6 teraflops. That's terrible right now. like yeah, this has a half precision compute, which like if you need it, believe me, you are much better off getting something like this, or especially something like this. And obviously this is insane, but it's also completely overpriced for most people. Like nobody really needs a Radeon Pro Vega 2 Duo, which is also a terrible name. So I really think that the Mac Pro is an absolute tragedy of a product, because it's because of its price and because of the fact that the MacBook Air with the M1 right now beats it in certain tasks, and it completely demolishes it in single core performance. So it might actually be like 50% better at gaming or something like that. So and it's not just gaming, obviously. The single core, it's probably even better at Photoshop, at least for like the non-export stuff. Like while you're actually using Photoshop, I think the MacBook Air might actually be better right now. And right now, the most interesting accessory for the Mac is also an overpriced one, but I don't think it's as egregiously overpriced as the Mac Pro, unless you count the stand. I think the Pro Display XDR is kind of a proof of concept for Apple. I think Apple wanted to show what they could make before they even have access to Mini LED. And I think it's gonna pay off down the road to have the expertise. It's kind of like the HomePod or even the AirPods Max. It's a niche product that could have stayed in the lab, but it's so finished in many ways. Like it's not like how how Microsoft shipped you like a Qualcomm chip inside the Surface, but they absolutely weren't ready for it. Like the Qualcomm chip wasn't quite good enough, but it's decent. And the software was absolutely horrendous, and even right now they still haven't had a good solution for emulating x86 software. So I think Apple's beta devices or proof of concept devices, even though expensive, usually pay off far better because they are actually technologically advanced. Whenever Apple egregiously overprices something in the accessories business, something like the Pro Display XDR, you can usually believe that it's pretty awesome for its price, because nothing else in this price point exists, because nobody wants to make a device that only like 100 YouTubers will buy and some people at Industrial Light and Magic for Disney production. And to the last point, because Suboito has been such an awesome listener, we're gonna cover the iMac colors. They're supposed to be coming out. Like those are the traditional iMac colors, and obviously Steve showing them off. But this has been probably like the most important render we have had thus far, which is also from Jon Prosser. So he's better than I made him out to be a little bit yesterday, but at least if this comes close. But I like his renders in general. That's what I was going to say. Like he isn't terrible as a person or at what he does. I just don't think that what he does is very much necessary, because we already have like this egregious leak culture. So yeah, like the iMac that's supposed to be coming out, it's gonna have like a like an iPad Pro inspired rectangular design with very hard edges, kind of also like the iPhone 12 series. But I would love for those colors to come true, because those are also like the colors of like the AirPods Max, which I love. Obviously didn't buy them, but it's like, it's still cool. Where are the colors here? Like, yeah, there's like this rose, there's bluish, and yeah, exactly. And then also green, which is also like, who buys green? I always hear from people, I want something in blue, I want something in red. Or something in black and white, but I never hear somebody say I want something in green. I think the colors on other Apple products, like on other Macs, it's very difficult to say, because the logistics for that need to be right. Like it almost makes sense to make more color options for a device that not many people will buy, because people will just then buy a device that like essentially just because it's there. So if other colors are sold out, they might just go for a red or even a green one. But I think on the MacBook Pro, like so many people just like the silver and like dark gray design, that it kind of it's kind of difficult to say, because you can usually get a MacBook like if you want to, and you at that point you will probably get it in the color you like. Like I think when you look at and we'll cover the iPad a little later, like I think the blue is like kind of the most realistic option, and would be one that I would still go for, even though it's a little bit too bright of a blue for me here that Apple is using right now. I would greatly prefer the blue that Apple uses on its 12 series iPhones. But yeah, I think that there's an opportunity here. I think the gold actually sold quite well for Apple, given how many of them I regularly see in university, or at least I saw before COVID. So I think it would be a good option, and I think that this is kind of the most important thing and the final thought I would have on the Mac, and it's going to be our longest topic here because given just how little we have had movements in something like AirPods, except for the Macs, or like the iPad, like we will cover those topics much more quicker, and I think we'll be about finished in an hour from now. So I think that's the most important part, like not necessarily with the colors themselves, but with the bigger choice with Macs. Like previously you were choosing a Mac for like a little bit more performance, like you could go for the MacBook Air to get the cheapest one, or like with the MacBook Pro 13-inch you could get like the cheaper version or the more expensive version. And I think there are also like rumors about like a G4 Cube style Mac Pro. I think the iMac is going to be much more versatile because more people might actually buy a 21/24-inch version. So I think the MacBook Pro, like the 14-inch and the 16-inch, might actually be powerhouses for like for the money. So which the 13-inch $1,800 MacBook Pro isn't. Like it has a decent CPU, but I don't think it's good enough to actually replace what some people expect from a 16-inch MacBook Pro style device. And then I think we're gonna see more versatility with the MacBook Air, and I think this is the device that is most likely to get other color options. So I think we could get something like blue and red on it, especially maybe like I would love a product red option MacBook Air, but it's kind of less likely because I don't think that Apple wants to introduce a color where they have to give away some of the money. So it makes Apple sound very evil in that way, but when there is so little demand for like a special color to then also give up some of the money, I can kind of see why they wouldn't do it, even though I would love for them to do so, and I think Apple could easily stomach some of the costs. So I'm not a defender here of like Apple not giving us options whenever they just want to make some money. I can fully understand their wish to make money everywhere and solid money, but I think that especially with the MacBook Air, they better be keeping it at around the price it is right now, because so many people just want an entry point. It doesn't matter to them how expensive it is, like how not good it is, like whether it has the latest parts. Like the MacBook Air doesn't have the latest parts in all of its forms, but people just see a 1K MacBook with industry-leading performance and they go for it. Like the 13-inch MacBook Pro gives you longer battery life, longer sustained performance, a brighter display, the touch bar, which some people hate, some people like, and more, and like even better microphones, even better speakers. But the $300 difference is more than enough for some people to say the MacBook Air is good enough. And I think this would be like, I would love a MacBook SE style device, like maybe something around $700 or $800, where like it's essentially the MacBook Air we have right now, but it's just a year from now or two, and it gets something like the M2, which is going to be a year old by that point, and it's like $800 or $900, and then a redesigned like MacBook Air is like $1,200. I think that would be quite fair, as long as Apple keeps some very decent, very newish hardware inside the device, like they do with the SE models on the Apple Watch and the iPhone. I think many people would still buy it. Yeah, product red on the Mac, instant buy. I can fully get you, man. I have heard it so much that I drive people insane with my predictions and wishes, but it's kind of the point, isn't it? Like, we need to voice our wishes to Apple because we want for them to actually make those products. So yeah, the blue from the Apple Watch, yeah, that's gonna be actually, once I update, I actually think I'm gonna keep my Apple Watch for 4 years overall. So I will probably get like the Apple Watch Series 8, which is also going to probably be the model with like the redesign and also like 5nm chips inside. So it would then allow me to keep it for like 5 years going from there, because I'm also already upgrading like the iPhone this year and either my iMac or my iPad. So I have enough of money to spend here. I don't want it to be even more, especially since I won't be able to enjoy as much new tech this year because of still the COVID restrictions and my work and my studies. So this has been the Mac, and it's been a 40-minute talk on something that I didn't expect to be longer than 20 minutes. I'm kind of afraid about the other product categories, but we're gonna probably be finished in about 10 minutes with the iPad. So yeah, we've covered all of the individual products. We've covered what makes the new generation of them so special, the M1, and we've covered our biggest expectations for the Suboida, I don't know what I should say to you about like what I think or don't think. I don't think it really matters, because ultimately it's just going to be a decision somewhere in the boardroom, and I also think it's going to be quite random. Like, maybe even if it's like $1 more expensive or not, Apple might decide to go for different colors because of it, because it can attract more people. But ultimately, if they don't see a point and they see like people happily buying silver and gray options, I don't think that they will go out of their way to make their logistics more difficult. The Apple Watch, let's actually do that. Let's go with the Apple Watch, because you've just asked me whether the Apple Watch Series 7 will be redesigned. I actually don't think so. Like, there were some rumors about it, but I think we would have heard something by now, not that it really matters. Like, the Apple Watch is very easy to talk about right now, because even though it has improved a lot, and I think more than most people give it credit for, it has also just seen one big redesign with like the Apple Watch Series 4 since its launch, and it also has like a pretty small lineup. Like, we will start with the cheapest one, which is also the one that you should like. Is this the Series 3? No, that's the SE. The Apple Watch Series 3 is a piece of BS in comparison to the SE, because while it is cheaper at $199, the difference between like the processors, the displays, the design overall, I think are so huge that people should just go for the Apple Watch SE. I think it's an absolutely awesome device. I think it still will look absolutely futuristic and great years from now. And at that price point, I actually don't think that we should ever expect like huge redesigns, even if we go for like a rectangular Apple Watch. I don't think that it changes fundamentally anything here. It's just a nice looking watch, and people keep their watches for 10 or 20 years, no matter how theoretically outdated the design actually is. And I think that the Apple Watch SE kind of covers all of that. And then with just the Apple Watch Series 6, which now combines basically most of the stuff anybody could ask for. It has an oxygen sensor. It has, it's interesting. Apple doesn't have a tech spec site for the Apple Watch, or is it like hidden? Yeah, you can compare all those models individually. So the Series 6 obviously has theoretically like the same display as the Apple Watch SE. It's just as waterproof, but it has significantly better health features, stuff like a blood oxygen sensor, an ECG app. But everything else is kind of similar. I think that matters between those devices. Well, I think the Apple Watch Series 3 is just too compromised, especially if you like look at those display comparisons. It's kind of a joke, because there is also like, I don't know why, but there's also UI in the way, like the New York here, and here you get like a full screen, which is very unfortunate for the Series 3 that already has like a much smaller display. And then there's also like the materials question with like the Apple Watches, because Apple can sometimes charge insane prices to upgrade the materials. But I think that for most people, aluminum is about right. And I actually prefer titanium over stainless steel. I've had a stainless steel Apple Watch with the Series 2, but it ultimately was too heavy for me. It wasn't fun working out with it, because the Apple Watch bands can be a little loose, or at least I prefer them to be, for them to be comfortable. And when you have a super heavy device like the stainless steel version, which the titanium version is a little lighter, then it just moves around too much on your wrist, and I just don't like it. Yeah, obviously the SE is limited to aluminum, which isn't a problem for me, because like down the road I might just go for an SE version once that is like significantly upgraded, or the SE would be the version that I give to other people's at least. But man, that blue, just look at that blue, it's so gorgeous. Like, I want that blue on all of my devices. So boy, to type in what you think is overpriced or not. Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying. Fundamentally, I think the overprice is very fair because the baseline is so good. I think that's very difficult to ascertain sometimes, because I think the Mac Pro is bad because the baseline is such a poor value. With the Apple Watch, like, nobody forces you to go with like a gold 16 karat version. Like, essentially, like, the blue here is also more beautiful than any other option here. Like, all right, the gold and like the space black stainless steel, which yes, like, oh, now it's called graphite. Interesting. Space black is now reserved for the titanium. That's actually cool. I actually didn't look at it. And the color of titanium is also apparently titanium, or as I call it, gray. So it's cool to see, but fundamentally, like, that would be my number one choice. I think some people, like we've seen from Tylosov would love a red like this, and it's kind of the red that's also really product reddish. Like, other reds really are weird, and I think the red iPhone 12 really looks actually bad. It looks too orangish, pinkish, salmon color. It just isn't good. But what I want to cover shortly is just like how important the health features are, even though I don't believe that everybody needs an ECG or blood oxygen app, especially when they're of young age. So I think the SE is perfect for those. So, but fundamentally, the Apple Watch has helped so many people and saved lives that I think it's kind of unfair for how some people still treat this category. Like, you can check out Neil Seibert, which I think is one of the best Apple analysts in the business. Like, he respects the Apple Watch. He's the one who gave out the recent numbers of like 100 million wrists being covered with Apple Watches worldwide. And he really understands the importance of this product category, of it being a logical expansion of the iPhone, it not just being an accessory. I think the SE is also priced correctly. I think the SE is priced perfectly, even though they are like now cheaper, like Samsung watches that also have ECG, which usually would put them in comparison with like the Series 6. I just don't think that they compete enough with performance and ecosystem or even design. Like, for me personally, obviously design is always subjective. And I think that if you can exclude the need for health features, I'm sorry guys, or one guy, I'm just not used to talking for that long uninterrupted. Usually somebody says something in between what I'm saying, and I should have prepared some water for myself, or maybe even a coffee to stay awake. So the rest of the podcast might be a little bit lower energy because of that. Or at least I'm just gonna breathe a little bit more often. I think I'm gonna leave all of this be, because it's a great opportunity to learn to just make a live stream, just check out where my limitations still lie and what I'm actually good at. And apparently I'm not quite as bad as I thought as keeping a thought, because yesterday we've been kind of meandering a lot, and right now I'm only changing topic whenever I'm reacting to the chat. I see what you're saying, Suboito, about the SE would be a killer deal if it had the latest chip. Let's also not forget, like, there's just one generation of chips between. DSE and like the Series 6. My voice is slowly but surely giving up. I think by the end of it, I'm gonna talk like this, and it's gonna turn into an ASMR lesson. Yeah, but I also believe that people who are buying in this price category might actually not care, and I think that they're gonna probably just get like 1 year less of software updates, unless there's something I'm missing about like RAM inside the Series 6, but I don't think that that's gonna be a problem for most people. So this is kind of my analysis of those products. I think for anybody who really wants a deep dive, you should really check out Neil Seibert, because I believe the Apple Watch is as important as he says, because of the health features helping so many people, and because of how transformative this product can be for wellness, for losing weight, for working out, and for detecting even more like important health issues aside from like just knowing your heart is okay. Yes, but an one channel ECG isn't also quite enough to do that all the time. But even more importantly, like down the road, we might start recognizing stuff like respiratory virus infections through something like the Apple Health features. We could analyze heart rhythms and oxygen levels concurrently, and then like through an algorithm detect how much they have changed in like the recent weeks or so. It's quite fascinating, and I would love to talk more about like medical appliances from Apple products, but I think this is going to be also covered somewhere down the road. I think we're going to have a long history of those kind of streams we're having right now. Yeah, so you're right, Zuboito. Like the S6 is 15 to 20% better. It's cool, and it's definitely more efficient. Like but it's fundamentally something that I don't think most of us will need or especially care about when like the device is $120 cheaper. Like, and especially the cellular version is something that I think is a killer deal. It's like $329 for a cellular Apple Watch. It's literally like $170 cheaper than this one, and it's kind of great. And I really want for Apple to continue that. I think this price is a little bit egregious, like a $100 price premium on a cellular modem that in the Apple Watch probably costs like $20 at most. That's a little harsh. So let's go next and let's cover something unimportant so that we can move through it a little quicker. Nice. The TV section also covers the Apple TV and the HomePod. And this is actually where I will disagree with a lot of people. Like, a lot of people don't understand the position of the HomePod in the market or the Apple TV. And for that, we just have to look at one very important tech spec that isn't a tech spec at all. It's the price. The Apple TV 4K comes in at a solid $179 for the 32GB version, and in Apple's most generous storage upgrade that you can find, $20 for an additional 32GB, unless you count the upgrade from 64 to 128, unlike the iPhone 11 series or even the 12, where you get like 64GB for $50. This is kind of in line with that, even though it's a little better. The Apple Watch is it's actually one of my favorite Apple products. I know so many people hate the Siri remote, and Zuboito, you're free to greatly disagree with me in the chat. I believe you don't like it as much as I do, or I don't think many people like it as much as I do. I think the Apple TV 4K cannot be evaluated on its value for what it is right now. But right now, I agree with everybody who says that the 32GB at $180, it's completely overpriced and it doesn't belong in the market. But think about when it launched in 2017, 3 years ago. This is when basically every smart TV was so slow that it needed some kind of Roku or Apple TV, or at that point Amazon had like a crazy cube that they tried to sell you. And right now we obviously have options like the new Google Stick, which is finally their logical conclusion after playing around with Chromecast for years. Oh, you haven't tried the Apple TV? Well, if you can get a highly discounted one, like maybe for $100, I think it would be great because it has by far like I've used the PS4 and PS4 Pro, and I've had friends with like not that I don't have them, but those friends had Xboxes. Like it's so much faster than even like a console with all the CPU power it has theoretically over it. Right now, next gen is also kind of starting to compete with the user experience, but it's also way more expensive. And if you don't game, it's also like a huge. It takes up a lot of space. Even though I know that like the Xbox Series S is like obviously a cool, thin and light device, but at that point it's also completely underpowered in comparison to the Series X, and a completely terrible value in the current next gen console space, even for its storage limitations. So I wouldn't buy one to stream video, especially given that you don't always get the latest streaming services on it. You always get them on Apple TV, by the way. Like HBO is always launching first on Apple devices. And this is also my most important point, because we have had rumors for quite a while about an A14 Apple TV, or an even better, an A14X Apple TV. There it is. So what rumors do we have? I think I'm gonna go again with I'm gonna go with iMore. I believe they had quite a good article about it. Yeah, that's it. That's from the end of last year. Because Fudge was promising like a huge focus in Apple Arcade, which I tried out when I had the time and really, really liked it. But right now I don't have the time to game a lot. I think that the LG Smart TV interface is the only one that I would actually use if I got one. And obviously you can still use something like Netflix on a Samsung TV or any other. But I think given the performance penalty you have with so many of the devices, like I hate how Roku's behave. And I think that the new Google Stick is great, but it's also a Google Stick. Like I don't like just Google for the privacy aspects. I don't want it to know what I'm watching, and I just don't trust it enough. So I think if Apple actually gets into an Apple Arcade thing where they give you like 6 or even 12 months of Apple Arcade with bigger games, and they price it for like $200 with like much more storage that is also usable, I think we would have a nice like Apple response for like, it would almost be a competitor to something like between last gen and current gen, or like current gen and next gen, depending on your namings for PS4 and PS5. Like in performance, it would be somewhere in between like the base level versions and like a little competitive with like the upgraded version, something like the PS4 Pro, but it also would have completely different CPU performance levels, like 4 times better. It would have completely lower latency from its memory. It would have faster streaming systems because Apple obviously only uses SSDs. So I think that an Apple TV, and I think Suboito is saying it quite right in chat, that focuses on gaming plus TV plus fitness. And if Apple, like obviously the best thing that Apple could do with an Apple TV is give it out with like a 6-month subscription to Apple One, or like a 4-month subscription to Apple One, the family plan version with like even more iCloud and more of those services supporting family sharing, and like with a heavy discount, or like just a 2-month or 3-month version of like Apple One, like the highest end configuration. It also has like Apple News Plus, which in my mind is still the worst Apple service by far, and Apple Fitness Plus, which I would like to try once it gets a limited, like a more international rollout. So yeah, I think that an Apple TV with a greatly expanded Apple Arcade, A14 processor, maybe a streaming app or two, like for streaming games from like xCloud and maybe even stuff from like PS Now. I think for people that are deeply ingrained in the Apple ecosystem, don't want to get a console, or just don't want the space to be taken up, I think it's quite a good deal. And if you just have to know an Apple TV should be bought when it launches or like in the first year. Everything afterwards, its value greatly diminishes because of the competition. But Apple doesn't lower prices. Like Apple is more likely to discontinue a product than lower the prices in between, or just keep inventory so low that you won't be able to get one. So this is kind of my rant on the Apple TV, not on the product itself, but how the market sees it, because I think it's super high performance. It respects privacy. It always gets Apple's latest services. I think Siri Remote is greatly overhated, and I think the Apple TV app, or like what you can access from Control Center, is like the best TV control interface you can have, because it's always automatically on. Whenever you swipe to a keyboard, your iPhone automatically notifies you. So I think that's incredible from a technological perspective. And I think if this device costs like $100 or $120, I think more people would buy it. And I would love for that to happen. And an Apple controller would be cool, but I think the rumors about it are so sparse that I'm just not gonna focus on them right now. And instead we're gonna jump into the next Apple TV product, because apparently Apple bundles them inside, which is the HomePod. Yep, TV, and now here's the HomePod. The HomePod, I don't have that much to say to it, except for that it's also a misunderstood product. I actually bought the HomePod when it was still $349, and I never regretted it. It even encouraged me to actually get a music streaming service, because like a lot of people will claim that somebody like me is like an Apple fanboy, but I have tried Spotify and other streaming services way before even a rumor about Apple Music. And I hated those apps. Like, I hated them so much. I hated the user interface. I wasn't just listening to music much. I didn't like any of the playlist suggestions wasn't something that I was liking a lot. But when Apple Music came out, like Beats One Radio, which I believe will now be Apple Music One Radio or something like that. Apple is slowly but surely renaming all their stuff. But I think it's difficult to understand the feeling of Apple products sometimes. When you open up a playlist that feels completely perfectly tailored to you, because Apple has been advertising like manually created playlists, not for you specifically, but from people with knowledge. Like, it's kind of like, I don't like people who just say, oh, I think you're gonna like this movie. I more prefer to know why people like a certain movie, and then I can think whether I can appreciate it on the same or a different level. And I think that's kind of what Apple Music turned out to be for me, and I started listening more to music. But I'm also not an Apple fanboy. Once I didn't have much need for it because I got YouTube Premium, and the HomePod also works with like the free version of Spotify, at least through AirPlay, and now at least the Spotify version is better integrated into Siri on the iPhone, so it's much easier than it was before. I would love for there to be a native Spotify version for the HomePod, but Spotify always complains about how Apple mistreats their developers. But then they're also always last to upgrade their devices, their services to support stuff like Siri and all of Apple's different hardware, like the Apple Watch. So my rant on the HomePod is also about it being a misunderstood product. I think that the big HomePod is a niche product that is designed to show off Apple's audio engineering prowess, and I think it absolutely nailed it. And I think the HomePod Mini is the best value compact smart speaker that you can have, just on the fact that it uses a privacy respecting assistant. Like, honestly, I would never, once I have children down the road, I would never install a Google Assistant device or an Alexa device in my home. But I would easily put like a HomePod Mini into my child's room if obviously the child wants it. I don't think that most people actually want something like that down the road. I think it's more of a gimmick. And I think the future is much more something like the Apple Watch, or just expanding assistants on devices like the iPhone and especially the iPad that you can also set up in your living room and just listen to it. because the speaker is also very, very good, especially in the Pro versions. I think this is a great product. One is obviously discontinued now, and we will probably be not seeing it. Right? I think we'll continue to see it on the Apple website until Apple replaces it. Even though the iMac Pro went away from the website, but it's all obviously because you also have like an almost identical 27-inch iMac always there. So I don't think it fundamentally changes much. And the HomePod Mini is awesome. It's cute. It still has great audio quality from what I've heard from most people. It has actually better processing, even though it doesn't need to. At least when it comes to efficiency, like the A8 processor inside the HomePod is actually quite decent because it has so much raw performance, but the HomePod Mini has a highly optimized processor. I think Siri works better than most people give it credit. I don't think it's amazing, and I will objectively say that it's worse than Google Assistant or Alexa for like smart stuff, and I think it very well competes and sometimes beats them when it comes to stuff like reminders, calendars, because there's also never a question of what this device will access. You know that through the cloud it will give this information to like your iPhone and all your other iCloud devices, while on Google those services sometimes have problems based on like a subscription you have or haven't. Like there's always been some bugs that interfered with it and they promised to fix it. So it's kind of a mess, but most people just don't even know that it can be a mess because most people just don't use it as extensively. Like they use it for music, for podcasts, for some for giving a message response for something that has to work through the iPhone anyway. So yeah, more diversity with speakers. Well, we have just had a rumor, I don't remember on what site it was, that Apple is working on new HomePods that have that have cameras and displays, and I think my internet right now isn't good enough to stream and do that parallelly. What the hell is going on here? Like, does 9to5Mac work? Yeah, apparently. So yeah, what I was gonna say, I don't think it's here. I don't think the rumor was covered by 9to5Mac. I tried to prepare like the latest rumors before going here, but yeah, there isn't rumors about like the HomePod with cameras. I'm just gonna access it, and there should be something in the news. Exactly, yeah, it wasn't Mac rumors, and now it's working. Okay, so there were rumors about it being like a Google style device. They have one like this that would have like an iPad almost attached to it, or at least like a screen. It doesn't say how big it is because there isn't that much information. Yeah, but it's difficult to say because I actually don't want that, especially if it's going to make it more expensive or if the screen is so crappy that it essentially doesn't matter. And if it has a camera, at that point also, why wouldn't I use an iPad? So, especially one that has a battery and I can carry around with me. It's a very difficult value proposition because I think the HomePod's best feature is its audio, bar none. But it will be interesting. I always like to give companies the benefit of the doubt. I don't have to buy it. Like they can invest into whatever they want in terms of research and development. As long as it's a good product, I might look at it. I might buy it. I don't have to. So I don't get why some people always complain when a company is working on something that they don't like. Like it's always to me like just don't buy it. Like as long as it isn't fully replacing something that you actually like, just stop complaining. We actually want companies to try out and to be bold. I would love to have like an Apple version of that kind of interface because I like the Home app and I like Apple's Weather app. And I like Apple's calendar notifications and like the pop-up notifications they have. It's pretty easy to sort of combine all of that, especially if you look at something like the Apple Watch and its interface. I think there's a lot to be gained here. But ultimately, this concludes our discussion on the Apple TV and the HomePod. It's not been quite as long, but I think we are going to do longer than 2 hours. Yeah, Siri is behind the others. I think there are only blind fanboys who will say that it's better. but I think it's also fair to say that it's as good a very important task, and I think that most people ultimately won't need stuff like the knowledge graph on Google. Like, we don't need the assistant to be like hyper sensitive to like conversation changes and like keeping up with the conversation. Like, you can always just ask one thing, and yeah, and it's basically done. Sure, if I ask something like how old is somebody, and then whether or not he or she is married, then Google Assistant is great for that. But how often can I not just type that into Google itself? And basically here I'm also advertising Google service, so I'm obviously not fully against Google. Yeah, I think Siri, I think Apple will push Siri. I think that they've had a good AI lead for a little bit, but not for quite as long as they would need to, because Apple doesn't have as much data to feed their AI algorithms. So I think down the road, maybe this year, but especially the year after that, we will see bigger changes to Apple's AI task. I think we will get much smarter assistants, and I'm not saying that because some people have been promising better Siris for like 10 years. Fundamentally, not that much has changed over the last 10 years. Like, there was a pretty big redesign somewhere in between the like from when it started and where we are now, but we didn't actually have like much better algorithms or substantially like even better hardware like on the servers for something like Siri. So I think it's hard to say that Apple really put all their effort into it. I really think they didn't. Yeah, but let's start with the next stuff. Yeah, I will disagree that Siri is not that great at all day stuff, because I'm always using it for alarms and timers, but I also know that it's maybe not quite as good as always recognizing your voice as you would like it to be. So maybe that's where some people get mistakes. And I think that Siri sometimes screws up answers for questions that it actually knows, because if you ask it again, then it actually knows. And it actually recognized the same sentence, but it still gave you a different response. So that's the weird part of Siri. I think that Siri is less reliable, and I think that makes people think that it's ultimately dumber than Google Assistant or Alexa, which it is, but I don't think as much as some people make it out to be. That's basically what I was gonna say, and I think we're gonna go to the next topic, which is we're gonna cover the iPad, and then we're gonna go to the iPhone, and probably talk a little bit about AirPods once we are at the iPhone, because I think we won't be needing much more than 10 minutes for the iPad. The iPad is very difficult for me to talk about because I will sound extremely biased, because the iPad is actually my very favorite Apple product. Like, I have said that I disproportionately love something like the Apple TV and the Apple Watch, where most people will still put the iPhone in front of those devices, and I will put the iPhone somewhere in between them. Like, I love the Apple Watch more than the actual iPhone, but I also wouldn't put the Apple TV much farther behind the iPhone. Yes, the iPhone is more versatile and it has always the best hardware in terms of Apple, but it's also a fundamentally different product. So I'm just comparing it on a I like it as much for what it is supposed to do ratio. Yeah, the iPad is my favorite device because I've been using an iPad Pro for 5 years as my main device. Oh my god, this was such a sluggish animation. I don't even want to know how it would look like on Chrome, because Chrome cannot even scroll right through the browser on like low power devices. So the iPad Pro, like, why iPad? I think it should cover iPad OS, which is my most important thing, because Apple has always optimized iOS for the iPad, but I think they supercharged it with iPad OS. You will go off around 9 p.m. Is that in 25 minutes for you? Are you in the same time zone as I am? Or is it 1.5 hours from now for you? Because I'm also finishing up by that time, so don't worry, Zuboito. This is going to be it. I'm not going to let it go to the point where I'm completely alone here. Is that all right? So the iPad is my favorite product because I think it's the most simple, laptop you can have, even though it's not a laptop, and I actually don't want it to be. And I think that with iPadOS it got significantly more powerful for stuff like even connecting a USB drive. But fun, yeah, all right. So 9 p.m. So I think we're gonna finish simultaneously, and this wasn't supposed to be a play on words here. So yeah, my point with the iPad is, and we'll try to be a little faster because I think I might make a dedicated piece on the iPad, and I will try covering more about like the current state of the iPad, which is a lineup that consists of the iPad Pro, the iPad Air, the iPad, and the base level iPad Mini, which I don't think that you should buy the base level iPad Mini now that the base level iPad now also has an A12 processor. But there isn't that much to talk about those devices. They haven't changed in years, and the base level iPad is basically just getting processor updates and maybe support for one or two new accessories at a time. The iPad Air is just following in the footsteps of the 2018 redesign. It's a great device. It has the A14 processor. Just keep in mind that with 4 gigs of RAM, it isn't necessarily as versatile as some would like it to be. And the A12X on the iPad Pro has 6 gigs of RAM. I also think that the iPad Pro has a surprisingly smaller bezel over the iPad Air for those who that matters, because those 0.1 inches apparently are pretty apparent even in diagonal, and I don't get why Apple cut down the diagonally from 11 to 10.9 inches unless it's just for differentiating the devices and make one look cheaper in comparison to the other. Then there's the overpriced Magic Keyboard. It's overpriced for the people who don't understand it. With it, it essentially turns into a laptop without the laptop OS, which for some people is a plus. Because when you actually look at the iPad specs, especially if you consider like an upcoming A14X version, I think that an A14X, which is essentially an M1 with a mini LED touch display, the best cameras on the front and back, like quad speaker interface, and the versatility that comes with it just being attachable and detachable from the Magic Keyboard. I think that's kind of worth, when you consider like the 12.9-inch iPad Pro and like the base level MacBook Air to be very similar. I think it's basically worth it. $300 premium, $400 if you get the iPad to 256 gigabytes. I think that's fair. Because it will be used so differently. Yes, for $400 I would usually expect something like a completely different GPU inside, but yeah, it's kind of cool, but it's also not very necessary right now. Like the A12Z right now is cool. I'm using the word cool because I don't want to say that Apple is just using how old is it now? Like it's like the iPad Pro launched in 2018. So and now the new iPad Pro launched at the beginning of last year, beginning to mid last year. So it's kind of outdated by now. And the iPad Pro is better in some ways, even though it doesn't have a ProMotion screen, even though I would love it. The iPad plus a keyboard is $1,350. You're typing it in euro. It's actually more in euro. The price you're also mentioning is also like it would be more in line with like a student discount, like a 10% discount, because the euro prices are also far worse than the dollar prices. And then the iPad Air is I think the best middle ground for most people. But fundamentally, I will make a video, I think, about iPads and iPadOS in general, because of how I think transformative this kind of interface would be if more developers actually fully went for it, and even Apple fully went for it by giving it versions of Xcode and Final Cut. So I think the iPad is the ultimate flexible device, which ironically is something what Suboito just wrote in the chat. You can also draw on it better, which is absolutely true. The Apple Pencil is a great device. Even the old one is still like has great latency, especially on 60 hertz. Like it doesn't need far less latency than it already has, and the colors are so cool on the iPad Air. So to me, what I just want to say as this video is about establishing a baseline is for you people to know. Right now it's just Useboito. I hope it's going to be more people in the chat, and because the next stream is going to be quite a while away, at least until the end of the week, until the end of the week. So I just want to say I love the iPad. I love how versatile it is. I love the limitations Apple gave it, so that developers had to grow out of their established routines and find out new solutions that actually work better, or at least more efficiently. Like you might not get all the capability of like a real laptop out of it, but you will do some stuff in much better ways. And for example, whenever I use like the regular Pixelmator on the iPad, it's just so fun to interact with my fingers there that it's just the only way I would ever consider using that right now. Yeah, the Air 4, not to confuse it with the A4 chip that was in the iPhone 10 and the original iPad. I also wasn't happy with the price. I think it would be a good price if it started with 128 gigabytes. And it would be especially an even greater price if it had like the full design of the iPad Pro with like the full quad speakers and like the 11-inch display. So essentially I think the logical compromises would be something like the ProMotion screen, some memory, maybe storage if you gave the iPad Pro 256 as a base level. But I also believe that $600, especially that it's also very unfavorable in some other currencies, it's a little bit much. But hey, look again at the rest of the industry and we will talk about what good devices are priced at. And even if I could get a cheaper and more powerful Windows device at that price, I still wouldn't get it, because I don't think that in this form factor any other operating system, so besides the iPad and iPadOS, even makes sense. Like Chrome OS still needs trackpad and keyboard. Windows obviously does, but even its touch interface isn't great to begin with. Like at least Chrome OS, you can sometimes use the touch interface. Like with Windows, like whenever you are doing something more powerful, just forget it and just don't even think about file management and stuff like that. At least not in an efficient way. So I think the iPad is great because it tried to redefine a lot. And for those who actually gave it a chance, like me, I've been using an iPad since the original iPad in 2010. I think it actually turned out great. And I really hope that Apple continues it. And maybe down the road, they will give the $600 version, which granted, if you count inflation from like the 2010 version, it was $500. It's kind of fair for a price increase. I would have preferred for the price to be $550, but it's Apple. They will just round it up to $600. So, and for the creme de la creme, the pièce de résistance, I have never had a single French lesson, so I've probably butchered that completely, even though I have enough of a basic knowledge of history and famous sayings and stuff like that. I never engage in anything French in my life. Let's come to the iPhone lineup. Let's start with the cheapest iPhone, the iPhone SE, which we've already pretty much covered. It has industry-leading performance for a device its size and price, but it's also woefully outdated in many areas. And while I think a $400 price point makes sense, you shouldn't forget that it costs significantly more in other areas, especially something like India, where a device like that would be much more attractive actually. So yeah, it's an interesting product, and I think it fulfills a niche, like certain people who just don't want a device without a home button, for people who don't like OLED because of pulse width modulation issues, which is actually more than you might think. Like I've found countless threads of people talking about this, but it's not what I think most enthusiasts will care about. Then, in terms of the lineup, we still have the iPhone XR and the iPhone 11, which are great base level products, which I think are a little bit high in terms of price. Like the iPhone XR, I think the iPhone 11 is easily more than $100 more worth than the iPhone XR. I think that should put the iPhone XR actually much closer to the iPhone SE in terms of price than it is to the iPhone 11. And just sitting somewhere in between just doesn't make sense to me. Like the iPhone 11 will last you longer, it has better performance, more memory, it has significantly better cameras. Like it just doesn't make sense. Even just the 1 year longer software update will give it a longer lifespan and better resale value if you decide to sell it down the road. The iPhone 12 is a little bit controversial in some parts. Like I think the design is great, the performance is great, the memory configuration for its price isn't great, like 64 gigabytes plus 4 gigs of RAM, but obviously iOS is very efficient in that way. But I think that this is kind of the most controversial part of it, and it's kind of been selling poorly, which is the iPhone 12 mini. And this is partially to blame on its battery life and also how close it is in price to the 6.1 inch version. Because when you look how Apple values the 6.1 inch form factor, that they're still having two older 6.1 inch devices in the lineup. I think it's kind of a no-brainer that Apple cares about this lineup. There's the iPhone XR, the iPhone 11, the iPhone 12 non-mini, and the iPhone 12 Pro non-max. Like those are all 6.1 inch devices. And I love the Pro series. It's always what I go for. You're absolutely right, Suboito. I think that the 11 to 10R discussion is pretty mute. I think most people know better performance, better battery life, much better cameras, a more versatile camera system with an additional camera, significantly better front-facing camera. Like I think it's an absolute no-brainer for just $100 more. And the iPhone Pro series that actually didn't get more expensive this year and actually got more base storage, which is why I believe it actually had quite a positive market reception, especially for those people who really love like the shiny design. Even though I will say that like the base level Pro sounds a little contradictory, but the 12 Pro non-max should have better battery life for its price. Everything else I kind of agree with. Like 120 Hertz is great, but I don't, as I said, I believe yesterday, I don't really care for it on smaller screens, and a lot of people I know have already been turning it off just for the better battery, even if battery is good enough. Like more battery for most people apparently is better than 120 Hertz, and I think especially the 6.1 inch version wouldn't be able to get anywhere near decent battery life, even if you gave it like 3,500 milliampere hours. Whereas I think the 12 Pro Max could, especially if you gave it like 4,500 milliampere hour battery. But why should Apple do it? If most people don't care about it, they will just give it this year. They will give it full LTPO with full variable refresh rate. So I love the iPhone. I will make a video about what I want from a perfect iPhone. But I will also say that the iPhone, just like any other smartphone, has gotten a little stale. Like it's not Apple's fault. It's just when you design a device like the original iPhone, then the iPhone 4, then you make something like the iPhone 10, you make something like the iPhone 11 camera. Like it's kind of difficult to make something much better without it also getting like twice as expensive. And even at that point, you still have diminishing returns. And that's just not what Apple wants to advertise. Like for them, it's much better to keep the iPhone 12 Pro at the same price as before, slightly increase the price on the base level version, which drives their profits to absolute insanity. And I don't mind what they did with the 12 series. I know that some people in the tech space try to compare it with some Android devices that are now much cheaper and are getting newer processors, or like the A52 and A72, which are now getting high refresh rate displays. But I also don't think that their processor is anywhere near as, not just near as good as the iPhone 12, that's a given, but I think it's nowhere near as good to be actually driving high refresh rate displays, because I've seen how Samsung works with high refresh rate displays on last gen high-end devices, where you whether you compromise resolution in order to get some performance and battery life and even enable high refresh, or you just don't like it at all. Like even the Galaxy Note 20 had stutter issues. Maybe it was like some software bug whenever it was updating, like in terms of VRR, when it was adapting to a new refresh, because this processor couldn't give you full 120 hertz. But it was noticeable. I'm setting up countless Android devices for a lot of people. Like I've seen Galaxy S20s, S21s. Like I don't like 120 hertz that much unless it's fully without compromise. And I think that Samsung comes damn near close this year, and think other Android vendors are doing an even better job. And I will cover it in my perfect iPhone video that I'm gonna do. But right now, I think the current lineup is perfect, given how expensive everything has gotten during the pandemic. I think it's quite good enough for the price. Quite good enough is always relatively, like for me, an iPhone is obviously worth more than a competitor with the same specs. But I also believe that given some of the compromises that you have to get with other devices, it's good. But I think the base level version should get cheaper and or get more storage next year. That's what I liked with the iPhone 12 Pro series this year, and didn't like as much with the base 12s. Especially the mini, that also compromises on battery life. But that's just like, it's very difficult to complain here, because people will buy iPhones no matter what you say. So I don't see where the motivation would be for Apple to go with more experimental features or super expensive to integrate features. I think they will much more focus on something like marketing the AirPods, which the base level AirPods are still basically what the originals were, but just with a little bit more smarts and slightly longer battery life. And the AirPods Pro is a device that I love, but because I don't love the form factor, like I like the AirPods form factor, but I don't like losing a device and having to get an $80 replacement for a single bud. That's why I have the Powerbeats, which some people might know, but I will also cover my current state of tech in other videos. So I've basically promised about 8 videos in this stream. Great job. I think the noise cancellation, from what I've tested on them, works absolutely brilliantly, and I think the AirPods Max are gonna be even better. But obviously the AirPods Max are compromised themselves because of their price. But I think the AirPods are a quintessential Apple product. They are a little high priced, especially if you don't get a good deal, which you can regularly get. I really recommend looking out for deals on the AirPods Pro, where you can get them regularly for like $180 or $200, which is cheaper than the wireless case version of the normal AirPods. They're thin, they're light, they're small, compact, they're smart. They are supremely integrated in the ecosystem, and for all of that you pay like a 10, 15 or 20% premium over other high-end brands, and you pay a 40 to 50% premium over like the cheaper value oriented brands. And I think that's absolutely fair. That's has always been Apple's MO. I don't know, Suboda, are you still in chat? You aren't typing in, but you were also supposed to go offline in about 5 minutes, which is fine because we're also wrapping it up here. I think I will do a follow-up, a smaller video, so it's now up to 9 videos that I've promised here, or maybe even more, who knows. So I like the AirPods, but fundamentally I prefer something like the Powerbeats. No, it went back to German. I prefer something that has at least one wire that I can still use, but I won't complain about the AirPods. It was pretty badass how Apple introduced them with the iPhone 7. and how much they've also improved from there. Great, you're here. The delay is also sometimes killing me whenever I'm asking. Yeah, great, man. Thanks for listening. Like, really, leave a comment, leave a like if you really liked the stream. We're probably around wrapping up soon. My point with the AirPods, I think there isn't that much to talk about because they're just a listening product. Like, they're smart. You can have some Siri functionality inside them. You can obviously do some light customization, even though it's insane that we still don't have full color customization for them. Even though we have them for the $550 AirPods Max for a niche product. So yeah, I might get AirPods Pro like just for testing once they release a new version. Like, not myself, but I will probably like a month or two down the road borrow it from a friend because I have some that always buy like new AirPods, and I would love to test it out. Because I think that Apple really needs to improve sound quality by now. Like, I'm just not happy with like EarPods level quality for like $170. I think the AirPods Pro are far better. At that point, price also doesn't matter as much as once you hit a certain threshold of listening quality, sound quality. And this is just what I would love for Apple to do. Improve the sound quality of the AirPods, maybe give them a similar design. You didn't try the Pro version, so boy, they're quite good. They're better, definitely better than the AirPods. But I also know quite a lot of people who just don't like anything with like this rubber tips. So they really, really want for Apple to keep the traditional AirPods design. So yeah, I fully get why actually more people are buying them, because I think they're also very, very iconic in how they look. And I think they're right now the pros are starting to take over, and I think Apple will be very smart to really leverage it. Like, make a cheaper like base AirPods with like the same design, like maybe like an AirPods SE, like normal AirPods with like a design somewhere in between AirPods and current Pros, and then give the Pros just fix for once some reliability issues for the hardware itself. It's going to be cheaper down the road, but also just make them better. It'll sound even better, and you won't even have to offer discounts in sites like Amazon. Yeah, exactly. The AirPods Pro are a little weird for the year, not because of the AirPods Pro themselves, but some people just don't like the rubber tips. I personally don't mind them on the Powerbeats 4, like the newest version, but I actually didn't like them on my previous gen Powerbeats 3. I was actually afraid that I would have to give up my Powerbeats 4 if they felt the same way, because I just don't think that they would be worth $150 at that point. But yeah, I really like the AirPods. It's not quite for me, but I don't begrudge anybody who really loves them. Yeah, I think we are basically finished with most of the stuff I promised. We have covered Macs, upcoming updates, and the current state of the M1. The fact that the iPad is like a little stale because we've had like a big redesign in 2018, but we also are still waiting for like an A14X iPad because it's taken quite a while. Obviously, the iPhone 12 is like in a bombastic state. The iPhone 12 series is selling faster, I believe, than even the iPhone 6 was. The Apple Watch is having like an incredible rate of new buyers of around 75%, whereas every other category is by now mostly dominated, except for the AirPods, I believe, by upgraders. The Apple Watch is still getting new people into the Apple Watch tent, and even the Apple tent overall, as people who buy an Apple Watch also get an iPhone because they know that it's like the best smartwatch, and they obviously want the phone that really works with it. I've covered the divided path that the Apple TV lineup is on, with like the Apple TV itself that is controversial because of its price and its Siri remote. I've covered the current state of the HomePod with the discontinued big version, and the future being probably more versatile than just a listening assistant. I think Apple would, if Apple actually introduces a display HomePod, I think they would leverage their power and their UI expertise from iOS to really make something special, where like you could overcome that Siri is a little dumb because you essentially have a mini iPad, but with like such a simple interface that you could use like an Apple Watch processor with it. Apple Watch plus AirPods equals win-win, Zeboito. You're absolutely right. Like I like not just AirPods, but I think genuinely like Apple W1, W2, whatever they're deciding to call their headphone chips. I believe it's now the H1 and H2. If you combine that with like the Apple Watch, you can work out, you can be seamlessly connected even without the iPhone, especially if you have the cellular version. And I've even covered Apple Music, which I think is an important part of that topic, because when 40 million people have Apple Music and like 50 or 60 million people down the road will have it, maybe 100 once Apple bundles it, like in like Apple One, and Apple One expands throughout the world and people see the value, especially of the family plan. I think that Apple has a bright future ahead. I don't think that Apple is completely bulletproof, and I will cover Apple's biggest problems. I have promised to cover the Apple Epic topic right now. I think I will make a dedicated video, so I think we're now officially up to 10 videos I've promised. What I would just say is like, if we cover the App Store, which is obviously the point of contention for companies like Epic, I will just say that the App Store has changed so much for the industry, for myself, how I engage with technology. Now we have 2 listeners. Did somebody tune in somehow right now? I would love that. We're just about wrapping up, so if you're an additional listener, just feel free to write something in the chat to say hi and later to leave a like or even subscribe. And I think that a 30% cut from the App Store was fair when it launched, but I also think that it now should be rethought. I don't like how some legislators are going about that. The Sweeney saga, I think, Zeboito, you're going to be interested in me talking about that issue once we both have more time. I will also fairly cover what I actually like about Epic. Like, I love the Unreal Engine that they are making. I love some of the deals that they are giving to developers. I don't like their fake stance on exclusivity. I don't like their stance on content being exclusive to one store. And I don't get their complaints about Apple while they're also making a lot of money from consoles. So consider this me covering this issue. I'm a little torn on some of the App Store controversies. I'm mostly on Apple's side because of the value of the App Store, but I'm also not blind, and I also know that Apple has enough money. Apple can cut their revenue, like their cut on the App Store, and they can allow more apps into the App Store without compromising quality. I think something like emulators would be a great start in order to preserve some older games, especially as more and more companies are not. Since I'm not getting to cover a lot of it right now, and I know that you like the Sweeney topic, Zeboito, you feel, I know that you hate that guy, so I think that I will make a stream either on Saturday or on Sunday, and it will kind of be a continuation of this stream, when I will also cover Apple's other services and how I feel about them. And I think this is going to be the more natural place for me to talk more about the App Store and its current issues. I think I might actually prepare a little more for that, because obviously I know most of the hardware points and like the major software points. I think that like my next video will probably be called all my thoughts on almost every Apple software product. I think this would be like a nice continuation here, and I think you would really like it. I think we're going to put Sweeney somewhere in the middle to keep you engaged from the very beginning. I know I'm right now just talking to one user, but for everybody who engages with this video down the road, right today, an hour from now, 5 days from now, maybe even years from now, if this channel either gets a little more popular or it goes down the drain completely and somebody finds it out of curiosity because I'm not deleting this, like, feel free to give me criticism, even it's 5 years from now. I would love to read it. Like, if the channel doesn't go anywhere, just Tell me what you liked about how I present stuff, what you didn't like, what you would like me to cover. Even if the channel is dead, I will still respond. Like if Google sends me a notification that I got a YouTube comment 5 years from now on a potentially dead channel, I will definitely respond. Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, Zuboto, I know that you agree more with Apple here than Epic does, but slightly more than I do. But you should still understand that I'm fully on the side of the App Store being the exclusive software distribution platform for iOS, and that's kind of my last point for today. I'm so grateful, first and foremost, for you, Zuboito, for staying engaged with the chat, for giving me ideas on Twitter and everywhere else we engage in conversation. I'm also grateful for the 2 or 3 people that raised the concurrent listener count from time to time. It's yeah, as I said, I didn't expect this stream to do quite as well as the last one. I would love to invite iJustine. She does a very different style from what I do, but I think we would still do well in a conversation. So who knows? Like if she agrees, do you think I will disagree on talking to an Apple YouTuber, like not exclusively Apple, but mostly Apple, that has like what? Let me look it up. YouTube. And let's go to iJustine. My God, what the hell is it? What are those recommendations on YouTube? iJustine has around 7 million subscribers. I would definitely invite her. I don't think that she will listen, but who knows? Like, feel free to actually send her the link. I don't want to do it myself. Maybe if like a fan of mine does it, if you consider myself a fan, and not just you, Zuboito, but whoever else is listening to this video. Like, I would love to do something like that, and I will talk about doing something like that in the future once I have established more of my own style and have a continuous stream of content down the road. So that's about it from me for now. I still don't have a great ending skew. Yesterday I said Auf Wiedersehen in the end, so I'm gonna repeat it today, but I'm gonna start with it. So I'm gonna say Auf Wiedersehen and goodbye. Thank you for listening, my dear viewers.